Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this live stream. This is our usual Saturday live stream on the Uyghur crisis, the genocide, the oppression, the killing, maiming, sterilization, and the desecration of the religion of Islam in Chinese occupied East Turkestan. Just before this, I said to Arsalan, we're going to discuss the Palestinian crisis and the reaction of some world leaders, Muslim leaders, to it, and those leaders being dead silent, absolutely dead silent on the Uyghurs, but being very vocal about the Palestinian issue. But just before that, Arsalan, I think it's worth highlighting the brother from Turkey. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen, and if you could speak about the story that you just told me about.
Yes, so brothers and sisters, first of all, if you are about the story, and he is not alone, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Uyghurs currently detained in Turkey's immigration or deportation centers. And basically, they are detained on because China sends out orders to Turkey saying that they are somehow involved in terrorism, especially accusing them of joining with ISIS. For example, I only share videos of brothers that I know or can vouch for. But there are hundreds of brothers out there currently being detained by Turkey simply based on China's orders. And as you can see in this video, normally they are treated like criminals. Literally, the Turkish authorities don't care if and it's very strange for many people to hear this. Like when you are watching this video, you're thinking it sounds like Zionists, like going into Palestinian homes, but no, Uyghurs are detained like this on a daily, weekly basis. There are raids done like this, and alhamdulillah, lucky for him, his wife, while this brother was still at the local police station, she was somehow able to visit him, give her phone to him, and make a quick message, and that's why this video has been able to come out. There are hundreds of brothers out there who have not 20 or 30 people that have been deported to China or to the camps already through Turkey. And so, we could, if we can get a lot of traction on this, through the media, Turkey's having a really bad time on media. That's why I put the message there on the tweet saying, if this guy was Palestinian, he wouldn't have been there in the first place, just to get people's blood boiling about this, because this has been going on for at least 2 years.
Yeah, and this is, for anybody watching, please go to Arsalan's Twitter. You can see Arsalan Hadayat there. Retweet this. This is unbelievable that these are people, just ordinary Uyghurs, who are going about their business, who are now being arrested, being wrongly accused of being members of terrorist groups, and possibly being sent back to China. Assalamu alaikum, Mazul. How are you doing? Jazakallah khair for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam. Great to see you guys.
Alhamdulillah. So, Mazul, we're just talking about this brother who is from Istanbul, and he was arrested. He may be deported to China, and then he'd just be in concentration camps. So Turkey was supposed to be a safe haven, but it's turning out that it's not only not a safe haven. It's almost like the Uyghurs can be traded for vaccines. The Uyghurs can be traded for success on the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. And this opens up the wider topic. In the UK here at least, Erdogan is loved. People love him for his stance on Palestine. They absolutely love him for that. But when it comes to the issue of East Turkestan, which is far greater in magnitude of oppression, although Palestine, in terms of Masjid al-Aqsa, there's no comparison, because that is the holiest site, the third holiest site in Islam. But in terms of oppression, the number one thing is East Turkestan in the entire Muslim world. He is dead silent on this, although back in 2010 or 8, he said there's a genocide going on. He's the first world leader to actually say this. So, like the Pakistani foreign minister being interviewed by some US news channel, which has gone viral, he's so vocal about Israel. And the woman asked him about the Uyghurs, and he's the first thing he said is we're friends with China, and we talk to them privately. What do you say to them privately? Well, we have conversations. So everybody right now is talking about the Palestinian issue, and rightly so. But we should be speaking about the Uyghur issue within the paradigm of the Palestine issue, because it goes to show that there are hypocritical statements coming out. You don't care about the Palestinians if you don't care about the Uyghurs, because they're both Muslim. So if you're going to be talking about like China supports the Palestinians and kills the Uyghurs, you're just as bad. Anybody who's supporting the Palestinians, not supporting the Uyghurs, you're basically, what are you? You're basically somebody who doesn't care about Muslims. Wow. You're an opportunist, and you are following geopolitics. You're not following the religion of Islam. Islam teaches you to basically value a Muslim life. And one thing I want to begin off with is the Prophet ﷺ in a Sahih Hadith. We know he goes to the Kaaba and he says he says directly to us that the blood of a Muslim is more valuable than the Kaaba. This is something I'm just paraphrasing a narration here. More valuable, even though it's such a holy sanctuary. Yet Al-Aqsa, Medina, the Masjid Nabwi, Kaaba, none of these places, not by analogy, none of these places are diminished by saying this, but the blood of a Muslim is very high in terms of honor. So what about the Uyghur blood? What about the Palestinian blood? It has to be consistent. And to relate to this, and I said this on Twitter, and some people got really upset at this and started attacking me, and it's attacked me on YouTube as well. I simply said I went to a protest for the Uyghurs in London with 15-20 people, and the Palestinian protest was literally tens of thousands of people, right? I'm not saying one or the other. I'm saying, why don't you bloody care about the Uyghurs as well? This is ridiculous. All the Muslims who are out for the Palestinians, why aren't you out for the Uyghurs? I mean, this just makes the Uyghurs feel like we should go to the West for help because the Muslim world is absolutely useless.
Yeah. No, I think the word that you used there.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, Arslan. Arslan, you say it first.
Yeah. So I just like, even as you saw, like with the media, right? I think a lot of people, and why we sort of rely on the West. And then I saw, for example, because even for me, like, because I've always followed Palestine, I've always followed these other oppressions together with the Uyghurs, but I really saw the double standard with the media when it came to Palestine. Like Brother Ali Dawa the other day pointed out, when the Palestinians dying while Israelis being killed, like just the media, like subhanallah, like, and now I understand people saying, oh, the West, they're using you. Well, subhanallah, like this is how they divide us. And so we need to come together, follow the Sunnah, and just support and do what you can with your abilities.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you guys were saying, it's very unfortunate that we live in a time where supporting human rights has become almost a political tool, as a tool to further your own agenda. Like the inherent value behind, providing basic rights to human beings, protecting people's freedom, protecting people's right to live. That inherent value of that just has completely disappeared. And just like what you guys were saying about the narrative in UK, it's a very similar narrative here in the US too. Like with Turkey's president speaking out, it's almost like, oh, this is our voice that we've been waiting for to represent the Islamic world. But the hypocrisy is very clear. The reports are very clear about how Turkey is treating the Uyghur Muslims. So it really goes against what our religion teaches, because one of the verses that I really love thinking about in these situations is verse 135 from Surah Nisa, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us, to stand for justice, stand as a witness to justice for the sake of Allah, even if it's against yourself, your parents, whether the person is rich or poor, none of that matters. And it's in these type of situations where it counts. Our leaders today, or quote unquote leaders, they are picking the dunya over the deen. Whatever aligns with their agenda, then they'll choose to stand with the deen. But if it goes against it, khalas, you can count them out, because they're going to be nowhere to be found.
Yeah, definitely. And this got me thinking about even us as Muslims, we can fall prey to this on a much smaller scale. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, someone said to me recently that, look, Sabur, if you keep speaking about the Uyghur issue, people are going to get bored because it's the same thing coming up again and again. So I understand what they're saying. What they're saying is, look, go back to what you're good at, which is the intellectual atheism stuff. Keep building the channel and then chuck the Uyghur stuff in. It's going to go further than if you keep populating it with Uyghur stuff, because then, and I've seen that happen in terms of views, in terms of subscribers. I've seen a decrease, right?
Yeah.
So the overall thing is, it makes sense. It actually makes sense, which is that you're looking at the bigger picture. But then I was kind of thinking, am I falling into the same trap that other people are falling into at a geopolitical level, which is, okay, I want to achieve this big aim of freeing Palestine, and China supporting the Palestinians, so let me be quiet about the Uyghurs for now. And the same with what I found just cringy, the Palestinian representative minister, I don't know what he was, and we're going to play that video shortly, in Chinese-occupied East Turkestan. And then coming out from him is, okay, let's just sort out a few things here. Yeah. Firstly, to enter a land which is occupied, right, and to do nothing, that in of itself is a huge thing. You're entering an occupied territory. You're not just going on holiday to Shenzhen. You're entering an occupied territory, so you have an obligation already. Now, of course, you can't fight a state, but on the minimum, use your voice. And he's basically just rubber stamping what's going on from the perspective of, yeah, everything looks all right, blah, blah, blah. Look, how can you, as a Palestinian, expect help for Palestine and do this to the Uyghurs? Because the same thing is being done to you, and you're complaining about the other Middle Eastern countries not, supporting you. They're doing the same thing. Oh, let's be supportive of Israel and America because we don't like Iran. We just need to understand that Allahu Akbar, yeah, it's not about any of these things. It's about justice, yeah. What is the just thing to do? The Prophet ﷺ told us a Muslim doesn't abandon another Muslim. This is a Sahih Hadith. A Muslim doesn't abandon a Muslim. Allah is in our aid when we're in the aid of another Muslim. So the fact is, even recently, somebody, Arslan, I think, was mentioning this before we went live about Turkey's economy going down. Well, maybe it's going down because they're flipping, giving out Uyghurs and trading them for vaccines. That's something to think about. Maybe that's the reason, right? And we really, I mean, Allahu Akbar, this Palestinian crisis recently really made me think how messed up we are, even as Muslims within the West, in terms of our activism. There's loads of things which were just really alarming to me.
I think to address the first thing you said about growing your channel and stuff, I think one of the most glorious attributes of Allah is that He is a Razaq. Like, He is the true source of sustenance, the true provider. So I think, and alhamdulillah, I know that about both of you guys, through the different projects that we've done, is that, our projects, our activism is first of all loyal to like Allah. Then from that, we try staying true to the cause. Everything else, the followers, the views, the content, all of that, all of those monetary and really man-made markers of success that exist within this space, all of that is secondary. Honestly, I would even argue is irrelevant, because when the intention is pure and when the work is pure, everything else will come following.
Yeah.
This reminds me of a hadith, inshallah I'm saying it right, where don't please the people, because eventually Allah will dishonor you in front of them. Please Allah, and eventually Allah will honor you, and the people will honor you as well. So and again, you don't even want that following. The following that you get, they're fake to begin with. So if you're real from the beginning, people know who you are, because eventually when you do sort of show who you are, then they're going to leave you anyway. So it's a catch-22.
It is. And that's the thing about Erdogan. That's the thing about Mahmoud Qureshi and these guys, that, I understand they're playing a game. Like, I understand Imran Khan is a very, is the best leader Pakistan had for decades, right? He's very much interested in Islamic identity, Islamic nationalism, whatever you want to call it. But he's basically playing out the long game. Deep down, he knows what's happening to the Uyghurs. He knows it's wrong, but
Mhm.
in his mind, it's kind of like, yeah, but we depend upon China, and China's going to be a superpower in the future. Well, Allah is greater than China. Allah is greater than the United States, and maybe what you're going to find. And I just had an interview earlier with a brother, Abdul Hakim Idris, right? You know, he said this, and I believe it. He said, "What's happening to East Turkestanis is going to happen to Pakistan." And I gave him the analogy, no, the example of Chinese nationals standing on top of a Pakistani police car, which anybody who's from Pakistan knows, you kick a police car, let alone stand on top of it, you're gonna get battered. Like they will beat the crap out of you. You may even just get tortured. Yeah. And the fact that Chinese people can do this and they can stand and humiliate Pakistani police officers, and Pakistani security services can't do anything, right? To the point that these filthy Han Chinese nationals who enter Pakistan, and some of them go off and want to do prostitution and all this type of crap. The Pakistani people can't stop them. Security services can't stop them. Now, I'm not saying all Han Chinese entering Pakistan are filthy or evil or any of these types of things. Of course, there's legitimate people coming for businesses, but the fact that one Pakistani government official said, "We don't have a relationship with China. We have a romance with China." That's disgusting. Yeah, you don't have a romance. What kind of a romance? What kind of sadomasochist, weird, disgusting thing is that? That this country is basically taking citizens, which are your citizens in the north, the Uyghur sisters, which married Pakistani brothers, are being snatched back, and you're just quiet about it. Yeah, and that is something which is in of itself humiliating. And I'm honestly thinking, yeah, that Pakistan and the Pakistani government needs to be careful, because they're messing with essentially a divine formula. And what is that formula? You side with the kuffar, you abandon the Muslims, this plus this equals something else. And let's not pretend like that's not going to happen. That can happen. Could be an earthquake, could be an economic collapse, could be a civil war, could be something else. You abandon a Muslim, you side with the kuffar, and you aid the kuffar in their narrative, because Pakistan, let's remember, started that UN rebuttal of what's happening in Chinese occupied East Turkestan, right? They actually started it. They didn't just support it. They started that thing with all the other Muslim countries supporting them. So the fact is, we need to be open and vocal about this. And anybody from Pakistan, if you're watching this now, on social media, at least start speaking about the issue. It may be dangerous in public, but definitely on social media, start talking about this, inshallah.
There was a story about a Pakistani imam. Were you able to verify that, Brother Subur? Apparently, he spoke out, and then he was arrested, but not sure how.
Yeah, I mean, something else did happen, which you are aware of, Arsalan, that there's a Vice documentary. And, honestly, I nearly cried when I saw that documentary, because you have an Uyghur brother speaking good Urdu who's living in Pakistan saying, these guys are beating me. They beat my father. My father died. I'm here. Like, why are you guys doing this to me? And he's a helpless person teaching children. And he's being harassed by the Pakistani security services. If that's not colonization, what the hell is colonization? When your own Muslim brothers are basically acting like Chinese proxies. They say Pakistan has proxies in Afghanistan and India and stuff like this, yeah? Well, China has proxies in the Muslim world, and that's these Pakistani security services. I'm not saying all of them, but whoever were involved in this disgusting behavior of beating an elderly man who died a few weeks later, this is and that's what we know about. Yeah. I'm pretty sure some Uyghurs have disappeared in Islamabad, Rawalpindi, Karachi, Faisalabad, other places, Peshawar, wherever they are. I'm sure those are in Chinese concentration camps right now, and I'm sure they disappeared from Pakistan, because Pakistan does have, I know this, and I've seen actually in Islamabad that they are actually Uyghurs. They are there. right? They're not visible, but if you go around, you will see them. So this is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Because this was something, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Why do you think, like, I mean, the rest of the world, you can come up with like different explanations, there's different agendas, but at least within the Muslim world, and especially not like forget the leaders for one sec, just the laymen people, the common people, why does there exist a difference between, for example, like, for the past few months or even years, it's just like we've been trying to bring attention to this issue, right? We caught some traction, but it was still relatively minor. But then, this Palestine issue, and rightfully so, Masjid al-Aqsa is one of the holiest sites in our religion, and it means a very big deal to us. But a greater number of at least the common population became activated towards this, and it's not like they didn't know what was happening. The Uyghur, even in mainstream media, it still caught some attention. So why the discrepancy, and why do you think that exists, or what is the root cause of that?
I personally think it's because there are just more popular people on it, not from your politicians to your actors to your like in the entertainment industry, like everyone was on it, and so those people who have Erdogan followers, Imran Khan followers, Fulan actor, Fulan singer, Fulan, you know what I mean? So they're followers, whereas the work that we do, we don't have that popular sort of support. So, for example, I liken this to Tibet. So when the Tibetan issue was first arose, you had so many popular Hollywood, Richard Gere and all these actors. There are a lot of Hollywood actors who are banned. They can't go to China because they supported Tibet for a long time. And therefore that support really was there. Whereas us, we really relied on people to follow and share videos, and then it got lots of retweets and that, but you didn't get that real support, that sort of, actors and like, when we talk about people of influence, yani, all of, the people that we follow. So for example, big names like Zakir Naik or Hamza Tort, like they're big for us, you know what I mean? But on a world stage, if you ask someone on the street, right, you go, who's Hamza Tortis? They're not really going to know, you know what I mean? But they'll know who Bruce Willis is. They'll know who Mel Gibson is. They'll know who Erdogan is. Like that level of people, I think, like that played a big role.
There's also something else, which is that Muslims generally, what we do is that we go behind a cause which is comfortable, right? So for example, if you look at the Palestinian issue, it's actually cool. You get all strands of people who have nothing in common with the Islamic worldview at all. In fact, some of their practices could be seen as just totally outside. I mean, we shouldn't be rubbing shoulders with those types of people, but everybody's on it. So you're just part of the cool gang, right? It's like a thing, Palestine, this, that. That's fine. I mean, we should be allying with people where we can, right? Yeah. However, when it comes to this particular issue, there is nothing sexy about it, right? From like Palestine is cool. It's something uncomfortable for the left because, if you like, there's a philosophical problem with the whole socialist movement and the workers' rights and communism and so on and so forth, and then China, which is supposed to be a socialist state. So because China is seen as a counterweight to US imperialism, and so is Russia. So you'll find, British politicians who are very pro-Palestine, right? Like Jeremy Corbyn. When it comes to the Palestine issue, you will not find much. You will not, the Uyghur issue, you will not find much. So right now, what we're facing a situation where the only reason why we're even doing this live stream and the only reason why we even managed to connect and know each other and this type of thing is because post 2017, it was in the interest of the Western world to highlight it. So these people who were isolated, like I knew about the Uyghur issue back in 2011. There's a friend in London. I've lost contact with him now, but he was telling me about this issue and I could not believe it. I was like, this is unbelievable. But that's all I heard. I only heard that part. There's nothing in the media. There's nothing going on in 2017 because of the Western media. And I'm not going to lie. It's not because of Arsalan or I didn't know these guys. Only because of them. And then I was like, what the hell is this? And then you reached out and you found people. So let's understand a few things. Palestine is also important for people because they've been hearing about it for decades. They've been hearing about it from the, that man who's protecting his son and the son got shot, that famous image. Everyone remembers this. Late 90s, early 2000s, Imazul, before your time. But me and Arsalan remember these things, yeah? And, the 70s, the 80s, the 60s, there's Palestinian stuff. And the thing is, about the Uyghur issue, it's been going on longer than the Palestinian issue. The Palestinian issue started in 1948. The Uyghur oppression started during the Manchu Empire. So we're talking about 100 or 130, 40 years ago, whatever. And even then, subhanAllah, I was reading this. I'm sure Arsalan knows these sources better than I do. I was reading a historical account of the Manchus and what they were trying to achieve in East Turkestan is identical to what Xi Jinping is trying to do right now. And similar things in terms of trying to rip Islam away from children and, try and pacify the Uyghurs through doing these types of things. So there is multi-faced. So one is the longevity of how long Palestine has been up there. Two, how it's not really convenient to speak about it. And three, which I do think is a genuine excuse, right? Palestine, anything happens, video clips come out, right? They just come out. What happens? Who's got images of someone being whipped or raped or sterilized in East Turkestan? Nobody. All we have is the testimony of the people that have come out, some physical markings that they have. But this Chinese regime has been so effective, and let's give credit where it's due, so effective at its torture and oppression. Nobody sees those images on a daily basis. And if you don't see it, it's out of your mind, right? And I think that's a huge part of it as well.
Yeah, definitely that. It just goes to show why China doesn't let in the media, because those images, as you mentioned, like the images that we share are bits and pieces, and we have to interpret it. And so you guys saw the clip of the first day of Eid. You saw those people dancing, and for the people that are not on what or how to understand Chinese propaganda, they go, oh, the Uyghurs are free. No, there was a marvelous thread. I said it as well on the day of Eid. A French reporter who was there, he took the moments before and after the dance. That one day before, they were making people rehearse the dance. Now that dance is normally done naturally. Like 5-10 years ago, that was done naturally. As soon as the Eid parade is over, people naturally start dancing. But that day, they had to get people, because it was banned for many years, they had to go, it's okay to dance, we're going to have cameras, and they were training them and everything. That's the best we're going to get. You're not going to get people being bombed or raped on the street. Like, all that happened, all of those things happen behind closed doors.
Yeah, definitely. And those images that you see where they got everybody to dance. The thing with the Chinese, and this is where you have to give credit to the Nazis as compared to the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, they're both, inshallah, going to have the same end. But in terms of the Nazis were evil, but they were pretty clever evil, right? The Chinese Communist Party is like dumb evil. So, for example, they're trying to in Kashgar, they're trying to show the Eidgah mosque. They're trying to show people going through the ceremonial dance after Eid, right? And they're trying to like pull off this stunt. Yet, I believe it's in Hotan, they have a masjid, and then they have the Chinese filthy flag above the masjid, the Chinese national atheist communist national anthem, and the Muslims are there on Eid day. That's the worst type of propaganda, because you're basically telling people on Eid day you have the Uyghur Muslims who are standing there when this kufri national anthem is being played in front of their masjid, and the Chinese flag. I mean, I literally get irate every single time I see an image of the Chinese flag on top of a masjid. So they're so dumb. They're literally so dumb with their narrative. You know, I was watching this interview, and it's almost laughable. They asked this, I think there's an Al Jazeera. They asked this guy in China who's like an academic, but he's just a charlatan, about, you know, China's policies in East Turkestan, because some things are undeniable. You know, the restrictions they're putting on Muslims and all those things are undeniable. They own their paperwork. His instant reply was, well, America bombed Iraq, you know, and this and that. At least we're not bombing them. Firstly, as soon as you give an answer like that, you've just admitted that you've done something. And all you're doing is you're saying, I'm not as bad as the other person. In effect, your argument is, they bombed Muslims, let us have a genocide, please. That's what you're basically saying. The second thing to point out is, not only is it irrelevant what happened in the Middle East in terms of America to what we're asking about the Uyghurs, we can say, and we can happily say this, the United States of America did not declare a war on Islam. They went to war in Iraq for oil. That's why they went to war. Everybody knows that. It's not a hidden secret. China is in East Turkestan because it wants to end Islam and for economic gain. So it's for two things. The economic side is not primary, it's secondary. The first thing is they want to finish off Islam there. So the fact is, when these whataboutisms are used, what about this, what about that, we have to understand that this argument, as dumb as it is, and we're laughing at it, all three of us collectively, sadly, a lot of Muslims are kind of like, yeah, you're right. Maybe China is a good counterweight to America. Well, you don't understand. China is going to be far, far, far worse than any, you know, trigger-happy Western army, right? This, you know, Mozambique said this when you were interviewing him, Arsalan, right? You know, the West, America in particular, who he was a prisoner in Gitmo, they believe in God. They have standards. They have human rights. They have some dignity. They have some level of accountability, right? But East Turkestan, the atheist, communist, Chinese-born people, no standards, no dignity, no mercy, no even act of remorse. I mean, we find a lot of Gitmo guards coming out and saying, oh, I can't believe this because one time there was a detainee and this happened and that happened and they're sad about it. Where's the Han Chinese soldiers coming out and saying, oh, you know, these women were being repeatedly raped, and when they were being raped, then blood was coming out because there was no lubricants to use on their whatever. Like, if you look at the disgusting, horrible things coming out, yeah, that there's literally cleaners that had to go in and clean up after rapes. Yeah. Where's the Han Chinese soldier saying this was disgusting, right? I can't believe I did this. I have PTSD, right? So we have to understand we're dealing with people that are a different level of evil, right? And we should never fall for these pathetic arguments of, oh, the West invaded Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever.
Yeah, just quickly before you start, like, I would say try and not engage with trolls. I know I don't. The other day I did because I kind of felt bored. But again, I engaged and I regretted it straight away because I started engaging like, oh, you're from Australia. What about the Australians what they did to the Aboriginals? I'm like, dude, that history is taught at school. Like, and we can protest about that. And as you mentioned, like in America, in Australia, like you have soldiers, you know, chucking away their badges. And I saw an IDF soldier talking about his PTSD, being like, he urinates every night because he sees the faces of the Palestinians he has killed in his life. Like there are spaces in those countries for you to backlash against the government. But in China, as you mentioned, were a Chinese soldier or PLA or any authority were to say, why are you harming the Uyghurs? And I'm just getting a comment saying, well, can we do a clubhouse waking up the Chinese people? Chinese people, to an extent, are awake. They can't do anything. For example, the whole thing about Xinjiang cotton, right? You know how there were big things like because Huawei and Nike wanted to boycott, and then then they started going against Huawei and Nike. Some Chinese people took it to a level where they were like, let's support Xinjiang people, meaning let's support Uyghur, because that's what they can say. And those posts were taken down. Like they wanted to take it to, let's look into it. So they only let like anti-American, anti-branding, they let that happen. But when it went to let's support Uyghur people, that was the that was a threshold that they couldn't get past. So
Yeah.
you can't do anything in China. There is no space for this.
You know,
Yeah.
it's interesting that we were talking about some of the fallacious, honestly, arguments that people are bringing towards like why or how some Chinese officials try to justify what they're doing. There was a book I was reading. It's called The War on Uyghurs by
Sorry, Mazel. Just before you continue, I'm gonna jump off the live stream for a couple of minutes. When I
Yeah.
come back, we'll do the video. But you guys carry on for now, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but Arsan, I was reading this book called The War on Uyghurs, right? It's by Sean Roberts. He's a professor in Washington, D.C. Very vocal about this entire issue. But in there, he had a very interesting analysis. So he was, so in the 2000s, right? After this is post 9/11, President George Bush of the USA, afterwards, they had declared, this is before like before the agenda of like oil, the weapons of mass destruction, all of that came about. He declared this like global war on terror, and that was, at that time there was no justification. It was like this ambiguous enemy they were going after, and that was kind of like the driving factor behind a lot of the invasions that the US engaged in. But what this professor argues in his book is that that narrative, because it was being led by one of the most powerful countries in the world, at that point, that narrative gave the license to a number of regimes that viewed their Muslim populations as a hindrance to their agenda, as an annoyance to their country. And so this is where you have countries like China and India stepping in. You know, they have agendas. Like India wants to establish a nation that is completely Hindu. China wants to uniform everyone. They want everyone to fit in and hold the president and the government at its supreme. And it was a very interesting argument, and even record some of the meetings between President Bush and the leaders of India, leaders of China, and I just thought it was like very interesting. And now, you know, my country, the U.S., right? We've committed all those violations. We came out empty-handed, didn't find anything that we initially spent billions of dollars for the war. We came out, and now the same reason that China first received a license to perform this despite the international pressure, we're standing up against it. And it goes back to something we mentioned earlier. This isn't out of like a natural concern that we have for human rights, or we feel like we have to stand up for these persecuted people. It's because it politically and economically makes sense for us to do so. And I think the more and more, like, inshallah, we keep holding these sessions and getting these facts out there, I think the more people become aware of the larger forces that are at play here.
Yeah, I actually interviewed Dr. Robert, so you guys can catch that interview on Talkies Turkish for an hour and a half. So yeah, we talk about that issue, and he talks about GWOT, so Global War on Terror, and China goes, well, we've got Muslims or terrorists in our borders, and so we're going to deal with them this way. And it was during that time where this group called ETIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement, was labeled a terrorist organization by the US. Because China said, look, this is a group that's been causing us trouble. Now, recently, I think it was around 6 months ago now, Pompeo said ETIM is off our terror list. So that in itself is saying, we're going to support Uyghurs, however.
Yeah.
And then, especially, I've seen with the media, the way that they've treated Palestine and the Uyghurs, right? The Western media is definitely biased against China. Like, any sort of balanced reports anymore when it comes to the Uyghur issues. It's straight up, and from this, I can clearly see that the West has an agenda for China, for sure, and then they also have a different agenda for Palestine. And again, it just happens to be that we are at present in line with the national interest of the West. But there is a genocide going on. It's not like it's not happening. But yeah, we're just so lucky. And at that time as well, it was easy to carry out that sort of war because from the 9/11 attacks, there was just a general hate for Muslims. It's like, let's just get rid of them. Just like you see when they're interviewing everyday Israelis on the street saying, I just saw interviews about the ceasefire and asked people like, oh, we should have kept on going. We should have wiped out Gaza. And like, you know, that sort of rhetoric was all over Western media 20 years ago. But yeah, unfortunately, this notion that we Muslims have in our heads about, you know, doing the right thing because it's the right thing doesn't exist anymore. You know, helping out, you know, the stories of that one king sending 70,000 black and white horses to save one Muslim in non-Muslim lands. Like all this, unfortunately, doesn't exist. It's all in our fairy tales. But we still do what we do, Yani. SubhanAllah, it's very sad.
Because it's ultimately Allah that blesses the efforts. You know, either I don't think there's been many issues or problems that humans alone. I don't think there's anything that humans alone are able to solve. You know, it's us having to even place that tiny step. You know, it's less about the outcome, more about the intention, put in the right direction, and Allah blesses that effort. And I think one of the best examples of that is how people won Battle of Badr. You know, Allah sent an army of angels, but it wasn't until the Sahabi took that first step. You know, because one angel could have destroyed the entire army. You know, but it wasn't until Sahabi like had stepped onto the lines themselves and taking that first step, then the army of angels came through. And I think that's a very important thing for not just us, like, but really everyone that's in this space trying to make a change, inshallah, to remember that aspect. But going back to the thing you were saying about the media, man, that's one thing. So one of our leading news reporting agencies here in the US is the New York Times. And even when, for example, I was reading an article yesterday about their coverage about the ceasefire between Israel and Palestine. And subhanAllah, it's like the language, if you're not paying attention, bro, subconsciously, it can be shaping the narrative that you interpret. And it goes back to how you interpret the conflict too. Like, for example, it talked about how there were over 200 or close to 300 Palestinians that have died. But then it says about 50,000, over 50,000 Palestinians have been displaced, right? But when it talks about the Israeli side, the losses, they could have simply said only 12 Israelis had, you know, very blatantly, you could show the discrepancy between the numbers that were affected. But instead of that, they focus on the number of rockets that Hamas fired, not even the number of rockets that hit Israel. Like, you know, because given the level of military technology that Israel has, I guarantee you like 85 to 90% of them didn't even enter a territory. But it was the attempted launches. So it's like they're trying to make the numbers seem sort of equal together, even though you're comparing different categories. And I was like, it's these subtle tricks that make the media the most powerful weapon of governments today.
Because the media shapes the mind of the people. That's why I always tell people, like it's saying you're in the States or wherever, look what the right is saying and like watch Fox News, watch CNN, like watch both sides and watch independent guy. You know, there's little channels, you know, watch, you know, both sides, and then you'll get some sort of idea. You can't be just watching Fox News all day or just CNN all day. You got to get all sides. And, you know, that's really prevalent for people that follow Turkish media as well, because you can't just watch pro-government Turkish news, state news. You got to watch, you know, stuff that criticizes the government. Then you get a fair idea of what's going on. But yeah, this media, like, they don't want it in our hands. So whenever you see regime-like governments or close to regime-like governments, anytime there's an issue in their country, what's the first thing they do? They cut the internet.
Yeah.
They don't cut anything else. They cut the internet. What for? You know, Iran, they cut the internet. Turkey, they cut the internet. Saudi, they cut the internet. So the moment they cut the internet in the US, man, like, just be careful. Like, just go into your house, go into the basement. It's highly unlikely, but if that were to happen in the US, then yeah.
Oh, I wanted to ask, because I know there were programs that existed within Turkey, endorsed by the Turkish government, to send the Uyghur people back to China. But what are the incentives of it? Do you know?
Turkey cut their ties with the West, so they're leeching onto China and Russia. So at the moment in Turkey, you've got a situation where they've sold off a lot of land to China and to Chinese businesses. They sold off to the Middle East as well, Qatar as well, but mostly China. A lot of the roads, a lot of the bridges are built by Chinese firms. China lends money, like bailout money, to Turkey. Businesses, you know, are propped up. A lot of Chinese investment. So that's where not just the silence, but the backing up of you know, the support for the oppression. And then you've got Turkey also use the Uyghur oppression, because from time to time they will give out a statement, right? Like, there'll be so much pressure in the world that, like, where's Turkey? And Turkey will say one sentence: we condemn such acts, but we also support the sovereignty of China and any enemies of. So they'll make that sort of statement, but so that they can get, you know, an extra 5-10% in deals, so that, you know, yeah. So that's why it's economic. That's the main reason why.
I think knowing that stuff, and because I've been speaking to a lot of like on-ground activists here in Chicago and in DC as well, and you know, knowing the facts like that, knowing how economically tied some of these regimes are to these other oppressive regimes, I think that often becomes a very discouraging factor for people that are working at the grassroots level, that are trying to get people to show up to protest, get people to sign up petitions, and, you know, do whatever they can in their individual power. And to address that discouragement, you know, there's an Islamic perspective to it, and obviously that is the most important one. But I want to ask you, like, what advice would you have to those kind of people?
I'd say continue to raise awareness and continue to those influences in that land, because alhamdulillah, like in Turkey, there are a lot of Islamic figures and nationalist figures out there who talk about the Uyghur issue, and at least that's there. And the people still support, because years of ethnic and religious relations, like we're tied to Turkey. And Turkey, no matter how bad it is still an influential player in the world. Again, it has the unofficial title of being the leader of the Muslims, has the unofficial title of being the leader of the Turks. So right now they're doing a really crappy job, but still they are influential, and therefore we hold them to account. If tomorrow they said, or if Erdogan represent Muslims, I don't speak for Palestine, I am not the hero of the Ummah. If he openly said this, then who cares about Turkey? You know, like, all right, you've become another Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan. But because they talk big, then we hold them to account. Hang on, you know, you're saying Allahu Akbar. You're saying send the armies of 50 odd nations to Palestine to support them. Well, couldn't you have made a similar statement for the Uyghurs? Why was that so easy, you know, for against Israel? So, or is not rail.
You know what's interesting about what you just said about Erdogan's thing about let's get 50 Muslim nations. I don't know what he said. Yeah,
it wasn't him. It was the foreign minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu. He said this. Obviously, he could only say that with the okay of Erdogan, right?
Yeah. No, I was actually thinking that. Look, at the end of the day, let's be frank here. Be as frank as possible.
Yeah.
So you want to send 50 or so Muslim countries to invade a piece of land and so free the Palestinians or whatever it is, whatever the narrative is. But what's the reason? The reason is because Muslims are being oppressed, killed, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, if we use the same formula and we apply it to the Uyghurs, we don't see that they're just oppressed. We see that actually the intent of the Israelis and the intent of the Chinese Communist Party are actually completely divergent. So what we find is that if you were to put together an army to invade, say, East Turkestan and free the Uyghurs, right? I say invade, but sorry, free, support the Uyghurs. What you're basically doing is, your argument is, these are people, the Chinese Communist Party are people who want to destroy Islam. Here is the evidence that they want to destroy Islam. With the Israelis, you can't do that. I'm sorry. I absolutely hate this Zionist state. Who doesn't? But I'm going to be honest. They are not declaring a war on Islam. In fact, they don't mind having a very cozy relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is very conservative. If Israel could fund a very conservative, ultra-conservative Islamic group in the Palestinian territories, which was like, obey the rulers, Israelis are the rulers, follow the Quran and Sunnah. You know, if they could support a group like this, they would do it. The fact is, I can say this with open clarity, they are, in terms of their, if we take aside Al-Aqsa, because Al-Aqsa is the red line, that's like the holiest place for Muslims after the Kaaba and after the Masjid of the Prophet. If we take that aside, you cannot compare the Chinese Communist Party and their oppression and their intent with the Zionists. The Zionists are looking pretty good compared to the Chinese Communist Party, and knowing what the Zionists have been up to and the brutality and the killing and the oppression, they're saying something. You know, I wish Brother Muhammad Hadib was here. You know, he's Palestinian. He has Palestinian family in the territory, and he's agreed to this. He said that the Uyghurs would be on holiday if they were in the Palestinian territories.
Yeah. Like what we see it, especially from my perspective, how relevant it is to the Palestinian issue. It's more of a land, taking of land issue. It's not necessarily Islam. I mean, people celebrate Eid, they fast. I mean, you see them. They're like, Ya Allah, like destroy Israel right in front of the army, and it's like right there, like, can you imagine a Uyghur doing that? Like it's no way, like. That's why we say, like, the freedoms that the Palestinians have, like, subhanallah, but obviously free Palestine, but from our perspective it's crazy.
And you know what else is interesting? You see those Arab governments which are surrounding Palestine.
Yeah,
they are openly treacherous to the Palestinians. If you look at certain news channels, they are putting out, a few years ago, they would be calling the Palestinians warriors and this and that. And now they're just like, oh, there's clashes and this and that. They're just downplaying the entire thing. SubhanAllah, they are supportive of the Uyghurs more so, right, than Pakistan and Bangladesh and these countries which are nearby. So it's interesting how the neighbors of the Uyghurs and the neighbors of the Palestinians sell each other out. This is a very interesting thing.
Anyway, should we do the reaction to the videos?
Yeah. Bismillah.
So just to make sure, these are videos released by the CCP?
Yeah. So the CGTN is a Chinese state-run media. Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm going to play it, and if you want me to stop Arsalan, just
yeah.
point it out.
لم يتوقف وصول الشخصيات الدينية من مختلف الدول الإسلامية إلى شينجيانغ، فمنذ عام 2016 تجري وسائل الإعلام الصينية والأجنبية مقابلات موضوعية في المنطقة الأساسية للحزام الاقتصادي لطريق الحرير لعدة مرات.
قبل حضوري إلى الصين أنا أعلم أن منطقة وإقليم شينجيانغ يوجد به مسلمون.
What I find special in Xinjiang was, for one place, you will find so many cultures, so many different ethnic minority groups, and I feel that the development done by the government is amazing. I feel very good when I saw that the ethnic minority groups, they are living very comfortably here. Their religious rights are protected.
ومن كل النواحي بما في ذلك أماكن العبادة. كما أيضا يعني تكلمنا إلى أئمة هذه المساجد والمشرفين عليها حول أوضاع التي تمر بها المساجد، فعلمنا منهم هذه الأماكن من كل النواحي حقيقة.
You know, I'm sure you have a lot to say on this, Arsalan, because obviously you've been to East Turkestan, you're East Turkestani. But I just wanted to say, there's one thing that stood out for me amongst all of those things. If I went to Al-Aqsa and I basically said, oh, the stuff you're hearing about Sheikh Jarrah and the stuff you're hearing about the Palestinians being hurt, this is not true. These Palestinians, they're more than happy in the state of Israel. Now, because I am standing in Al-Aqsa and I'm saying the state of Israel, I'm basically giving away that I'm a sellout, that basically I believe Al-Aqsa belongs to Israel. And that will show that I'm a traitor. Straight away, Muslims will be like, oh, there you go, he's a traitor. But if I say Palestine, this is a Palestinian territory, they'll say, okay, he's one of us. Now, he's there, the Palestinian ambassador, and what does he say? Xinjiang. What the hell is Xinjiang? Xinjiang is the same thing Israel. It's the name given by the occupier. And that straight away shows he knows nothing about the history. He knows nothing about anything, because even that name itself would make Uyghurs cringe.
Yeah, the couple of things you notice in the clip, straight away from that popular, the Idka Mosque, the plaque is missing, the La ilaha illallah plaque entrance. I don't know if you can show it, but and then you notice in the school, besides that one spokesperson, that imam spokesperson having a beard, none of the students, if they really are students, have a beard. Like, you would at least have one beard. People, like, these are people training to be imams. So it just goes to show they plucked people out of the street and to just be there. See, there is no plaque of La ilaha illallah, and above that, you got the Chinese flag. Where are the people? Kashgar is the most crowded, most populous city, one of the most, like second after Urumqi. There's no one on the street. Like, people say, I've seen whenever you see videos of Uyghurs walking, those streets are really scarce. It's not like the West where you have a few people walking here and there. It's proper. If you look at the old videos, like 2012, 13, 14, even 15, the streets are very crowded. Like, by this, you don't see any more people on the street anymore. They really have to look for people. But yeah, and if you notice, they purposely got speakers from Muslim countries to speak on this. And they themselves are following the orders. Obviously, they're not going to be speaking the truth because they don't want. So this guy's speaking on behalf of Egypt, right? Egypt doesn't want to break its tie. You think the forget the Chinese government. You think the Egyptian government is going to have this guy Adil Ali to speak the truth? What's going to happen to him when he goes back to Egypt? He might as well stay in China.
Also, I just want to add, I'm not surprised.
Carry on.
No, I was gonna say I'm not surprised at all that they have an Indian reporter in there. You know, both of them are genocidal regimes that are attacking the Muslim. Obviously, they're gonna have one Indian guy there.
Yeah. You know, if you look just behind the editor, the placard is missing, right? And that has the Bismillah on it. and the Chinese flag is above this. Now that in of itself, I just want to highlight something. Now the Eidgah mosque, I'm not saying is like Al-Aqsa. It's not. No mosque is like Al-Aqsa. Al-Aqsa is Al-Aqsa. It's the first Qibla. But can you imagine if the Israeli flag was on top of
Al-Aqsa.
a masjid, let alone Al-Aqsa, just a masjid? Can you imagine the uproar that would cause? Yet the Eidgah mosque, which is hundreds of years old, has a Chinese flag, right? So the thing is, what we need to understand, and I've been really thinking about how to frame this in a way that doesn't make us sound like we're calling for violence, because we're not. But we need to understand that the person that we're dealing with, the narcissistic empire of the Chinese Communist state, they have declared a all-out war on Islam. I'm not calling for violence, but I'm saying let's call a spade a spade. They are actually causing us to do the activism that we're doing. We're not calling for violence, but we need to understand it is a physical war, a mental war, a digital war. They have the largest land army, the largest air force, the largest navy, with cybersecurity, nuclear weapons, everything you can imagine. And we need to understand, with all of those technologies, they're going to war with Allah and His Messenger. That's exactly what they're doing. And if you're not convinced at this point that this is going to affect you, then I just ask you for a simple thing. I ask you to go back and look at the Soviet Union and look at when Lenin was taking over Russia. East Turkestan was independent. It was not all independent, but there was some. There's a lot more autonomy and stuff. West Turkestan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, those countries were freely Muslim practicing countries. Yet the communism came to them, and then they got battered, and for decades and decades and decades, Islam got sent back centuries, essentially, right? So the same thing we are telling you guys, the Muslim world, Pakistan, these other countries nearby, they looks like, oh, you know what? It's the Uyghurs. They're going to get it. They're separatists or whatever. These Chinese agents, the Chinese Communist Party, when they go and spread their ideology and they make these deals, like they've made a deal with Iran, a 25-year deal, which is not to be disclosed to the public. These things, you think they're not going to secure their assets? You think they're not going to use these politicians as proxies? Of course they are. We're already seeing that in Pakistan. So we need to understand this is going to affect our generation, our children, and our great-grandchildren are going to be looking at the Muslims of the year 2021 and saying, these guys were completely oblivious to this monster which is taking over. And I'm sad to say this, the people with the most accurate description of the Chinese Communist Party are the right-wing people in America. They are the people who actually really understand what this state is about.
Yeah, as you mentioned with the flags, you had some mosques with the images of Xi Jinping and Mao Zedong in the mosque, images. So can you imagine the picture of Astaghfirullah Netanyahu in a mosque in Palestine? So like that's what we're dealing with, you know. So, yani, yeah, I'm speechless. Have you got any other videos to show?
Do you, if you have any?
Yeah. Yes, I do. I'll just pop it up. Hold on 1 second.
You can share your screen as well.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how these issues, you know, as atrocious and as disgusting as they are slowly waking up the Muslim population around the world. You know, especially with the Palestine issue, but I think inshallah the Uyghur issue too. Because these, you see their blatant attack on our religion, and you know, I just don't see how you know, a lot of our Muslim population can just overlook these things. And inshallah, this can be a source of a unity for us, because you know, we know that given the different arguments and disagreements that that exist within our people, but like It's these things that will truly, so like their agenda might be to, you know, destroy the people, destroy their beliefs, destroy what they believe in, and make them lose faith. But ultimately, it's having the opposite effect. It's making people come together. So, alhamdulillah for that, though.
That's true.
Also, that other Ali guy from the Egypt News Administration, I'm trying to find him because they said that he's an editor of that news outlet. I can't find him on just like the 4 pages of Google that I've been on, and you know, I think it's worth exploring the background of these people and the organizations they represent.
Might be like that French journalist who didn't exist.
I was just going to say that. Where is it? How can I speak? Okay.
And you know, just to add to this, something which I think is a wake-up call for everybody, right? You know, you get some Muslims who are like idealists, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, why are the Uyghurs turning towards the West? You know, Muslims should just be supporting Muslims. I would just ask them a very simple question. I would say, so brother, you're here. Let me put you in the situation of brother Umar Farouk from Turkey, who I spoke to recently, right? He has 4 daughters. 2 daughters are stuck and he doesn't know where they are. His relatives are missing as well in East Turkestan. He's going through obviously a very traumatic situation. His wife and 2 daughters are in Istanbul, and his other 2 kids are in East Turkestan, right? You think a brother like that, you know, we're going to go up to him and say, oh, there's a friendly government which is being friendly to you, to support you in terms of the Uyghurs, in terms of human rights, and they're willing to highlight the issue. And then you get to Pakistan, you get to Saudi Arabia, you get to these Muslim countries who are supporting this. But you should be an idealist, my brother. You shouldn't go with this help. No one would ever accept that. People, the very basic instinct, the basic human instinct is to protect your family. Yeah, the basic human instinct is to protect life. So this ridiculous argument that we get, oh, why are we supporting the Uyghur issue? The West is against China. That's ridiculous. We might as well say, let's not support the Palestinians because China believes that Jerusalem should be the capital of Palestine. Let's see how that, let's go to a massive Palestinian protest and say, don't support the Palestinians because China supports the Palestinians. It's such a ridiculous argument. I honestly think some people don't have brain cells. They talk and talk, but they don't have brain cells. Use your head. If there are people who are willing to side with us, support us, why would we stop a hand that's reaching out to us for support? Why would we deny that? And we're not saying that, oh, let's not make this let's ignore this being a Muslim issue. Let's make this some geopolitical issue which is secular. We're not saying that. We're saying it's a Muslim issue first and last. But where on earth did you get this idea that if people are willing to help you, fair enough, they may have their own agendas. But why on earth would we reject their help? That is the most ludicrous thing you can imagine in this situation.
Yeah.
I'll just share a video with you. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, I was just going to add that, like, a great parallel to that is you can find the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, early days of persecution. You know, they took the support of a Christian king. You know, and they even though like that king was believing in something completely contrary to what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was preaching, he lent a hand, and they took that hand, and it was because it made sense though, and it at that time it aligned well with their goals. So like, I think we have roots for that as well.
That's a very, very good point. And you know, something that you said, brother Mazel, I think is very interesting, is you see there was a Christian king who was sympathetic to the Muslim cause. Now, what does Allah say in the Quran? Allah says the closest to the believers are those who say we are Christians. Subhanallah, if you look at the Iraq war, if you look at the Afghanistan war, if you look at the Bosnian conflict, if you look at the Palestinian conflict, all of these things, they are sincere Christians. Sincere as in they want to help the Muslims to help the Muslims, not for other geopolitical reasons. And they do exist. And I believe 100% that we need to go back to the seerah and look at the world from that perspective, not this 0-1 binary perspective. The Prophet ﷺ, what did he do? He raised his blessed hands to make dua for the Romans to win over the Persians. Why? Because the Romans were closer to the Sahaba than they were to the Persians, and the Quraysh were closer to the Persians because they were mushriks aslan, they were pure mushriks. And when it comes to the Christians, they had belief in prophets, they had belief in God, but they had the Trinity, which is obviously shirk. So we need to understand, we need to be mature about this. I was speaking to a scholar, Arsalan was there. We're not going to mention which scholar it is. We were getting advice from him on these issues, and he's speaking about them. And he just gave something very simple. He said, guys, we need to be mature. Like, it's a very simple thing. Be mature. Think about the entire holistic picture before we speak. Because even in the comment section, some Muslims who I know they're good people because I see them commenting on other videos, so they're not like trolls or anything. Anytime this issue comes up, people start having doubts about, American agenda, CIA agenda. CIA was founded, 1940s, right? The Uyghur genocide is and oppression has been going on for 100 and something years. Yeah. This is what you call the genetic fallacy. It's actually a formal fallacy that just because there seems to be an origin of something, then therefore you can dismiss the entire thing.
Yeah. And I think in addition to maturity, it's just, and that's another thing you realize that the Prophet ﷺ had, the Sahabi had, a lot of our, the leaders that, were leading Islam to its peak, they had a sense of wisdom too. I think a lot of times when you see these one-sided or very just black and white way of looking at these things, it makes you wonder what kind of like utopian world are we trying to like envision ourselves in? Like, this is not how it's ever been. So I don't know where we get these things. And frankly, when you issue advice like this and when you express opinions like this, it in fact, I think, discourages more and more people because it just makes them realize how far-fetched such a solution is. And so I think it's just contrary.
That's a very, very profound point. And I felt that myself, right? It's kind of like this light bulb is not working. Yeah. So Salan and you say to me, bro, can we change this light bulb? And I say to you, my brothers, before we change the light bulb, let's make a union and let's challenge the owner of this building so he gives us a better rate of electricity. Like, exactly. Honestly, we're talking about East Turkestani women being raped, sterilized, children being snatched from their parents, and then someone turns around and says, we need the Khalifa, we need a grand pan-Islamic state. Well, yeah, okay, fine. You have this idea. What are we going to do about those people right now? Yeah. Right now, what are we going to do about them? You may have this idealistic solution to everything, being the Khalifa and being Islam, some sort of grand Islamic, pan-Islamic state. But let's deal with the light bulb first. Let's deal with the immediate problem at hand. You can't say, and some people go even beyond this. Yeah, some people don't even say, to deal with the East Turkestan issue, it's not the state, it's not, we need a Khalifa. They'll go one step even further. They'll say, the real problem is most Muslims don't pray. And the real bigger problem is not everybody knows that. And the other bigger problem than that, there are these 20 scholars in Saudi Arabia and they're the only representatives of Islam and everybody needs to follow them. Like, what the heck? When are we going to get to any real solution, right?
Yeah.
So these people, the way I see them is I see them as, if you don't want to do something, like Bani Israel, you keep asking random questions. What color cow? Does the cow have to be glowing? Does it have to be? You just don't want to do anything. So you might as well admit it rather than saying we need a Khalifa or the real problem is Tawheed or the real problem is people don't pray. You don't know what you're doing. So sit down, have a sandwich and get lost. We're going to free inshallah East Turkestan in our lives, and you can sit there with your grandchildren and remember nostalgically that you aren't a CCP prisoner because of the activism of the people of the 21st century who weren't believing in the nonsense that you believe in.
Yeah. And I think this is what gives rise to that unofficial concept of living room politics. Everyone thinks that they have the solution, and it's just this grand scheme. Dude, it's gonna sound harsh, but I think it's a glorified way of giving up. towards actual real solution. Because people ultimately like just don't want to do anything, but they want to act like they're on the right path. They want to act like they are the champion of the ultimate truth, and nothing ever gets done, and the same reality just continues to exist. And to add on to that list that you mentioned of like excuse people make, another one that I've been like hearing a lot, and like yes, it is the ultimate truth, but it's the Imam Mahdi one. It's like, oh, we need to wait for the Mahdi. Okay, great. If everyone thought like that, subhanAllah, we would have never overcome any problem in our ummah. Like that would have been ridiculous. Like yes, the Imam Mahdi will come, but the Imam Mahdi will be a regular human being that has an insane amount of character and iman. It could literally be anyone.
Allahu Akbar. And you said it right, because ultimately, we can say Imam Mahdi, we can say this, we can say that, but if we think about the Mongols, right, and we think about what they did to the Islamic world, they came from the east, they broke across. Interestingly, the first people that they subjugated before they subjugated the rest of the Muslim world was the Turkic people, right? So once the Turkish castle fell, then the rest of the Muslim world fell. So imagine during the time of what was the name of the Sultan in Egypt? No. So Sultan Qutuz. Sultan Qutuz. He's the one who fought the Mongols at Ain Jalut, and he defeated them for the first time decisively, right? Imagine a Sultan Qutuz who is being threatened by the Mongols who had taken Baghdad, and they'd actually gone all the way westwards, and they were headed towards Egypt and Makkah and Medina and everything. Imagine if Sultan Qutuz said, oh, okay, let's make dua for Mahdi. He stood up, took his sword, went out, and he fought them at Ain Jalut, and he battered them, right? And with the Chinese communist state, Roshan Abbas labeled it that East Turkestan is Islam's eastern fortress, and if it falls, Islam will fall. They will come in like the hordes. They will come in like Yajuj Majuj. I'm not saying they're Yajuj Majuj. I'm saying that's the way they're going to come in, and hordes. Yeah. I honestly 100% believe that. It's like your first line of defense. If it breaks, then that's it. The enemy is all over your town. It's all over your civilian populations, and it's walking around. So if we can stop the enemy right on the border, which is 1/6 of China, it's a large landmass, right? East Turkestan, then they can no longer take this BRI project, which is essentially, it's not an economic project, it's a military project disguised as an economic project. And then they're going to use this to actually control the Muslim world and try and influence the Western world. And we really have to think of it this way. If we're 30 years from now, you may have Muslims fighting the Chinese Communist Party in Africa or in the deserts of Sindh. Well, it's better that we understand that all of us collectively can economically constrain China, the Muslim countries and the Western countries, so that we can never get to that level. And this is something I want everybody to understand. Just yesterday or the day before, there was this $100 million something. Arslan, do you know what this was about? I saw on Twitter some deal that was cancelled, and China lost a trade of 100 million something with the Czech government, I believe, or Lithuania. Lithuania maybe.
I forget which country, but or even Latvia, one of them, or a European country where, because they wanted or they recognized the genocide as a genocide, China cuts its deals, and vice versa.
In this case, it was the opposite. It was some sort of economic deal which was worth 100 billion. So no, 100 million. So I'm not saying 100 billion. 100 million, and that 100 million was supposed to be paid by this European government to China for something, and that's been cut now. And
I think it was Samoa.
No, I believe it's a Western country. But the way we have to think about it is that basically means less Chinese soldiers in East Turkestan, and less camera equipment, and less ability. Because let's be honest, right? Their operation in East Turkestan, which is 1/6 of the current map of China, is costing them a lot of money. It's costing them a lot of money, which is why they're trying to save money by organ harvesting and capitalizing rape and other stuff. But if they keep this up, they're simply going to bleed themselves to death, because you cannot militarize 1/6 of China, right, of what they consider China, permanently, right? And they're going to find themselves in a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, they think is dangerous. They do, and you know, this is something Louisa Grieve said in one of the things, and this interview in the Hudson Institute, that these millions of Uyghurs that you've put in concentration camps, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because even if they weren't rebellious to China, they're going to be rebellious now, and you can't release them, and you can't hold them indefinitely. So you're just stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, I think they've realized that now as well, that you can't release those people because you've turned them into your own worst nightmare.
Yes.
Because they weren't what you said to be terrorists or extremists, but you've turned them, you know, just like with certain, I'm not going to mention certain people's names, but when certain law-abiding citizens you know, are captured by the CIA, they're tortured and they're released, they end up becoming extreme just through the torture methods.
And they may not be doing. This is the thing, guys.
They're just not stable anymore.
They're just not stable anymore.
Yeah.
You want to play the video?
Yeah. So I'm not going to tell you what this video is about. I just want like a blind reaction, right? I'm guessing none of you guys have seen this. Just reading the subtitles because it's in Chinese.
默默，最近很多人看了你的视频，他们就老是私信问我，内地的汉族和维吾尔族到底能不能结婚呢？他们就是特别想来我们新疆找一个维吾尔族姑娘当老婆。那么你给他们大概说一下吧。
大雷，你要老实交代了，你是不是想把我介绍给你的汉族朋友？大家都知道我们新疆是个瓜果香甜、风景优美，而且还是个美女如云的地方。比如说呢，就是米利热巴、米利纳扎，还有汉宁克斯，还有我们新疆伊犁的佟丽娅。有句话说得好，五步以娜扎，十步以热巴，也就是说，你会来到新疆看到像娜扎、像热巴一样的美女。你们想在这个新疆找老婆，那就说明你们有眼光太好了。
那么默默，你应该知道，维汉婚姻呢，在我们新疆毕竟是少数中的少数，毕竟两个民族有太大的不同，比如说生活方式。那么你觉得汉族小伙需要做哪些事儿可以娶到维吾尔族的姑娘？
其实吧，大雷，最重要的就是两个人的互相相爱。但是也要注意这几个点。第一个呢，就是两个民族嘛，要互相尊重各自的生活方式和他的信仰。第二个就是，汉族男孩子要过来新疆发展，不然的话，这两个人的恋爱就不会长久了。第三个呢，就是脸皮要厚一点，就像你这样子，这样子才能追到一个美丽的屋里了，并且要克服双方父母的这些反对。那大雷，我问你，你们家有几百只羊和几百只牛？
我们家只养了2只鸡。
2只鸡。我再跟你说一下第4点，就是男孩子呢要有个经济基础，没有经济基础呢要准备几十匹马、几百只羊、几百只牛。
这么多吗？
好了，开玩笑。反正你这样子的话，就娶不到新疆媳妇儿的，你要加油。
好的，加油。默默，你刚才总结特别到位，但是有一点呢，就是你前面说汉族男孩一定要来我们新疆，其实不是的。据我所知呢，很多维吾尔族姑娘，她们去了内地，嫁给汉族的男孩，很多也没有回来新疆。所以说，只要感情深，距离根本就不是问题。我再给你说一下啊，我身边也有汉族的男孩娶的维吾尔族姑娘，也有很多的汉族姑娘嫁给了维吾尔族男孩，所以说维汉结婚是一定可以的，而且在我们新疆，维汉通婚还有10万块钱的奖励呢。
10万？确定？
对啊。
你们听到10万有没有心动？那赶紧来新疆。大雷，这么跟你说吧，我们维吾尔族女孩子呢是一个淳朴。
So Like, so from the get-go, well, like, what did you guys just watch? What did you guys see just there?
If that doesn't raise an arm, what does? Honestly,
What the heck did I just watch?
You know when we hear that Uyghur sisters are Han Chinese men are paid to come into the camps and they pay like prostitution to go and rape these girls. It sounds far-fetched to somebody who's not in tune. Look at what they're doing right now. It's very clear. A Muslim woman is not allowed to marry a kafir. Standard, right? That's the standard. A Muslim man is not allowed to marry someone who's not a Jew or a Christian. Han Chinese, what do they have? They believe in the Chinese communist stuff or whatever, Taoism, whatever it is. Or the women are beautiful here, and you can come over. What the hell is this? This is asking for sexual assault. I've seen a video in which this Chinese soldier with he's got this army uniform. He's sitting down in the house of a Uyghur woman and her daughter. The daughter looks 14, and he's sitting there. He's making a video, TikTok or something, saying, "Look, I want to marry your daughter." And the woman is like, you could tell she's scared, but she's just like saying nothing happens. And this is sick stuff. If the Israelis did 1% of this, 1%. There was a Palestinian woman that they're like, okay, you can go harass her, you can go have sex with her, you could do this, you could do that. You would find there would be riots. There would be Israeli embassies being, bombarded with litter and protests and all this type of stuff. Yet they are so shameless. And I said before, their propaganda is so pathetic. Like, that almost looked like a parody. You showed it to me. I haven't seen this before. But honestly, that could just be a parody. Someone making fun of how crap their thing is. But honestly, as Muslims, we have ghira for our religion, ghira for our women. Yeah. If this doesn't boil your blood and make you want to hate the Chinese Communist Party and dedicate your life to fighting them, then what else is going to do that? No other oppression in the Muslim world is this bad.
No, but you see what they do, because we talk about it. How many times have we talked about Uyghurs being forced to marry Han Chinese? So they'll rebut it this way. Look, we pay them. It's said $100,000, but it's 100,000 RMB, which is about 15,000 US, which is a lot of money. But not everyone gets that. Only a handful of people will get that money, and then they'll promote them. Others, some will get money, and most will not. It will just be, oh, you don't want to marry him? Yalla, go. Let's go. Let's take you to the camp. It's like they don't even need to pay them. The payment is more for the Chinese. And did you notice that even in that propaganda, the Uyghur girl was like, the Chinese man should live with them with the Uyghurs in the Uyghur land. But he was like, nah, like I've heard of many Uyghurs going to the inner parts of China. Like even that Uyghur who was supposed to be speaking on behalf of, she doesn't have her own voice. She gave a little bit something away. They're like, oh, long distance relationships don't go. The guy should come and live with the Uyghur. But it's like, oh no, you might as well. The Uyghur should go into the inner. And then what's going to happen? That woman's going to be Chinese. The children are going to grow up Chinese. They're going to go to Chinese schools. And then you've got like a stolen generation thing happening.
Yeah.
No, it's campaigns like this that, dude, I don't see how this can't give rise to such a predatory mindset and predatory culture surrounding this institution. Like it's not only just socially acceptable, but it's being government endorsed. And it'd be insane if they gave access to any legitimate human rights organization that has the credibility to research this. Like what you were saying, the rates of sexual assault, the predatory behavior are going to skyrocket. There's no other way, because this is oppression that's endorsed, in fact, recommended clearly by propaganda like this.
Yes. So can you imagine all the untold stories? So like for a Uyghur woman gets raped by a Chinese guy. What's the woman going to do? She can't tell her family, because all she's going to do is she's just going to make them angry. She can't go to the authorities unless the person raped her was not Chinese. Then the government, oh, a Uyghur raped you, let's go get him. So it's like, what? You're complaining about a Chinese person raping you? That's it. You're going into the camps. Why complain? It's literally like that.
Yeah,
It's
and
literally like that.
the Chinese Han Chinese settlers, and let's call them what they are. The population of Han Chinese in 1940s was no more than, I think, 5%, just some little, literally nothing. Now they are supposedly 50%. They act like settlers. I've seen videos where a Han Chinese man is walking around. There's a woman making naan bread. He's like, take off that hijab. She takes it off. Then there's another guy that he's sitting next to, some Uyghur man. He starts insulting him, and he says to him, yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Yeah. And he's just got his phone. They act like the police. The Han Chinese settlers. And guys, I think we need to be very honest here. Very, very honest here. The Chinese have a particular, the Chinese government have a particular method to pacifying East Turkestan, which is by sending in people, lots and lots and lots and lots of people. So they've increased tenfold since the 1940s, right? So we're talking about 50 something percent. Another 20, 30 years, 70%, 80%. Then it's like, how is this ancient Muslim land? We hear about Mahmud al-Kashgari, or we hear about Sultan Satuk Burga Khan, or these scholars, or these people. What are you talking about? That's finished. Even if you look at the images from Urumqi, from Hotan, from Kashgar, or whatever, you look at the inner cities, nothing looks Turkic, nothing looks Middle Eastern anymore. But if you go back only 10 years, and there's this YouTube channel, Journeyman Pictures, it's like an Australian one, and they've done the earliest documentary on the Uyghurs that I've seen by a Western media outlet, which is 2002. And you can actually see they are going to the various parts of East Turkestan, and they're showing you the local scenery. It looks totally Middle Eastern. It looks so Turkic. The colors, the feel, the markets, the bazaars, the clothing people are wearing, everything. And now when you look at it, honestly, what's the difference between Shenzhen and some parts of Urumqi? It's only when you go to these derelict and broken down areas that you go to see, oh, that's the old city. Oh, that's basically this. Another 20 or 30 years and that's it. It's done. The transformation is complete.
Yeah.
Oh man, it just hurts different when you know that our sisters especially are being attacked like this. That because even if you go through some of the documents that have been leaked out about like the torture tactics and strategies that have been employed, a lot of times, and this is not something exclusive to China. A lot of the oppressive regimes that have attacked our people, it's just, the women have been at the forefront of that attack. And it's incredibly heartbreaking. May Allah protect them, and may Allah grant them a sense of justice, inshallah.
Inshallah. Guys, I wanted to highlight something as well. Because look, at the end of the day, what did the Prophet ﷺ teach us? That the best jihad is a word of truth against a tyrant. Yeah. And the tyrannical regime that we're dealing with at the moment, the work that we're doing and the work that we want others to do as well, is nothing less than a defense of the Muslim lives and their property and their honor. So I wanted to highlight something. There's a brother, I want to invite him to the live stream. I'm not sure if he's gonna actually see this message, but that guy, Daniel, what's his name? Dumbrell. So this volunteer for the Uyghur Freedom Organization, he's written a 4,500 word expose where he goes through his stuff, he breaks it down, timelines, using an internet time machine where you go back and you find articles. I read it the other day when he sent me the first draft, and inshallah when this goes on our website, ufo.ngo, it's gonna rock some boats. Like CGTN has a lot of answering to do. He has a lot of answering to do. This guy is nothing less than a pure CCP representative. That's all he is. He's trying to come across in a particular way. And these types of people, they are mini Goebbels. That's what they are. They're there to support the genocide, support the oppression. His big company and the links it has with the Chinese Communist Party is and you know what it goes to show you? You can be brought up in a Western country, right, with liberal Western ideas of democracy and human rights and yada yada yada, but someone throws money in your face, and some people are willing to sell their souls. And people like this, inshallah, a lot more of them are going to get exposed. I mean, he's the most prominent one in the world right now, a white monkey, from the perspective, not a racial perspective, white monkey, but the Chinese government calls the Chinese, whoever they are, call them this, that these are Westerners who are all praising China and coming up with their narrative. But this stuff, guys, is so, like, when I went through it, I was like, this is so evil. Like, some people, what level? I mean, Arslan, you debated this guy. Remember, I was giving you feedback. He sounded yeah.
So it's funny. One thing people have to look out for when you're watching Westerners talk about China, you have to ask yourself, how come, with any sort of issue anywhere in the world, you're going to get at least a few voices talking the opposite of what's going on, right? Can anyone name one YouTuber who's a Westerner talking bad about China while they're still in China? One. If you cannot find one, you have to come on our team. The mere fact that Westerners cannot speak in China, one, like criticizing the government or talking, look, guys, there actually is camps, or Muslims are being persecuted. If there isn't one, there's always one. And what I mean by is, for example, in America, right? Black Lives Matter. A lot of black people say black people are persecuted by the US government, systematic racism. Then there's another group of black people saying, no, there's no systematic racism, all's hunky-dory. There's always two sides. How can we never hear that second side? Now, forget Westerners. How come we don't see Chinese people? How come we don't see Uyghurs? How come we don't see Tibetans, Christians, or whatever group, local Chinese who are currently the citizens of China, not one person speaking against China who is still alive, not in prison, and who is on YouTube, who is speaking freely? Not one. So unless someone can get that one person, you can't say China is free or China is open or that there's nothing going on.
Definitely.
What's happening? Brother Subur left or something.
Oh, did it disappear?
Yeah.
That's incredibly heartbreaking, man. And that's an excellent point that you bring up, that that whole opposite side is just missing that narrative.
Yeah. So for example, you've got people that, for example, the Palestinian issue. Well, you got Naz Daily. Naz Daily is like, Israel's cool. He has a voice. We're not going to say he's good or bad. Like, he's a tool. We know that, but you know what I mean? Like, he has and people use him. There's this other side, right? And then you always have this issue here. So I always use that. For example, when I was talking to Daniel, I go, Daniel, right now, if you criticize just a little, just say Xi Jinping looks like Winnie the Pooh, you're gone, buddy. Like, you can't even make simple statements like this. It's like, look, for example, Imazul, right? You can make a Trump joke right now, right? And imagine Trump was president. Are you afraid that, FBI or whatever is going to not come? Why did you make a joke about Trump? Or, for example, I saw a video of Biden the other day. Like, how he stutters and he talks crazy. And you can go, Biden sucks or whatever. He's an old whatever. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're an American citizen in America, and you can criticize your government. I can criticize the Australian government. Nothing's going to happen to us. China cannot say the same thing about what happens in their own land.
Yeah. You know, I think that's worth thinking about, because I think you have to have a degree of insecurity as a government to not be able to even tolerate. Now, for example, like battle, you know, is that perspective. But if you can't even allow for that opposite narrative and perspective to exist, you know, I think that really says something about how feeble and how weak the foundation upon which you stand is.
Yeah. So, guys, the 1st of July, you know, obviously because of Corona and stuff, these restrictions are still there. But we should have a discussion about what are good things that we can do. Because obviously we have a large volunteering
Actually,
base.
what restrictions? You know, when push comes to shove, I feel like, you know, like these restrictions are not even. So, for example, there were restrictions in Turkey, right? And we know how restricted Turkey is. Like they had proper curfew up until just a couple of days ago. Man, people all over the street for Gaza. You know what I mean? So, and you know that and happened all over the world as well. So when push comes to shove, it doesn't really matter, does it? If you got the numbers, that is.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And especially, Imazu, you're on mute at the moment, but especially with the West, how it supports, no one's going to be, you know, restricting people when, especially, I can understand if it's still like an Israeli-Palestine sort of protest, but with the Uyghurs, no way. They'll be like, go for it. I would assume.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
So should we just remind people one more time about that brother in
yes,
Turkey?
please share your screen. Yeah.
Sort of, yeah. So for the people that weren't here at the beginning of the show, we do have, and what's been happening for a long time, Uyghurs being detained in Turkey, simply Turkey following China's orders. But we have this video because this person being detained, while he was simply at the local police station, his wife was able to sneak in her phone, and just quickly he was able to make a video to get this out. So we've translated it. So if you can share his story, he's currently in like a deportation center, immigration center in Turkey, and we fear that he may be deported. Some Uyghurs have been deported. So we're just getting this out there so that the Turkish government is at least pressured not to send this brother back. Even though we can't save all Uyghurs from being deported, at least this one can still be there and support his family. His name is Nurzat Abdujalil. So in a time where, you know, for example, if the Israelis were pressuring Turkey and if this guy was Palestinian, you know, we would never even see this video. Palestinians being taken in this manner, but on a daily basis, Uyghurs are being detained by the Turkish authorities, and with the threat of being deported.
Yeah. You would think with the whole Turkish government, TRT world supporting, you know, Abdul Hamid, Rahimullah, his documentary, his series, the Ottoman, Ertugrul, you know, Usman, you know, it's just, you would think like the whole, even I remember I was watching this random scene from Ertugrul, and, you know, this guy came and he was a traveler, and someone asked him, where did you come from? And he basically said, like, I came from like Turkestan, because that's what they were doing. They were traveling from Turkestan. That was when they said home, they didn't actually mean Anatolia. Home, they were immigrants. Home for them was Turkestan, and they called it Turkestan. Whether that was West or East Turkestan, doesn't matter. It was just Turkestan. So, you know, even, I mean, it's sad to say this, but even if we totally divorce the Muslim angle and we look at it purely as an ethnical issue, a secular Turk, right, as someone who doesn't like say they may be even atheist, even they have an obligation to help because of pure ethnic reasons, let alone, the Muslim side. So yeah, it's really sad that Turkey, the Turkish government is like this. But Arslan, I find that I get a lot of messages of support from Turks for the Uyghurs. So there seems to be this general thing about Turks supporting Uyghurs. I get this on Twitter, you get this on YouTube. Like generally, you see the Turkish flag and the Uyghur flag. A lot of people raising those flags together. Like that. Like I haven't spent that much time in Turkey, but like generally, are people aware and do they support the Uyghurs?
Yeah. The of Uyghurs. Again, it's that ethnic, cultural, lingual tie. The languages are very similar, and Turkish people are very, very supportive. It's just that disconnect with government, and unfortunately, it's not just Uyghurs. Like Turks themselves are having a very bad time politically, economically, and just that. Their energy towards causes like the Uyghur cause goes also against their interest, because there are a lot of Turkish companies and the work for these companies, are invested in Turkey, and so the people are in two minds as to what to do. But as I mentioned before, a lot of Muslim scholars, imams, because it's not like they have like famous speakers as well, so they're all the political parties except the main party, which is Erdogan's party, who doesn't support. All the other opposition parties, they all support the Uyghurs. So yeah.
All right, that's good. It's good to know. At least on a street level, there's a lot of Turkish support. I mean, why wouldn't they be? It just makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, I'm sure they, there's a lot of affiliation with the Uyghur, because it's very similar language, very similar culture.
Yeah.
Do you get any support, like East Turkestan as a state? Does it get support, not from the governments, but the people of those republics? Are they aware of what's going on, and are they supportive?
The ones that know do. I mean, it's very hard to gauge, because one, they themselves cannot politically, you never see protests in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. They are still new to democracy. This sort of, this sort of culture, this sort of cancel culture, and this sort of, social media justice thing. It seems to be a Western thing. It's catching on with some Eastern European countries, some Arab countries. We saw with the Arab Spring, but still in the Central Asian area, it's not really, hasn't really taken on. Russia. You've got like one opposition with Navalny, for example, and even that. So China is like, Russia is like a slightly freer version of China. Russia is, like a little free. Like you still have that opposition. Like Navalny was willing to go back and still do things. You know what I mean? He has the right to forego food, and his images are taken and whatnot. But unfortunately, there's no media covering it there, and it's very suppressed.
Yeah, they have a lot of what do you call it? Government ties between, say, something like Kazakhstan and the Chinese government. I was listening to this talk by some guy, some academic. He was talking about, I've forgotten the figure, but I think it's like 10% of the people in the camps are Kazakhs. And some of these Kazakhs are actually proper Kazakh citizens. They're not Kazakhs living in East Turkestan. And he's spent, I mean, I don't know what exactly evidence he has for this, but he said the mood on the streets of Kazakhstan is not an inch of the BRI until the Uyghurs and the Kazakhs and this concentration camp nonsense ends. He said that's the street level view, not the government view. But the people who know about it are obviously irate about it. They're livid about it.
Yeah, I mean, we interviewed Gulbaha Jalilova, where she's ethnically Uyghur, but she's never ever been a citizen of China, and they gave her Chinese ID, and she was in there for 15 months. So can you imagine Subur, right? Imagine you, right? You go and visit the Uyghur region, right? And then and we've interviewed her many times. We know her story, and they take you from your hotel room. All right, Subur, you are now a Chinese citizen, and they lock you up. That's exactly that, and you don't know the language, you don't know anything, right? You only know English, and that's it. But yeah, that's what's been happening.
Yeah, very sad. Allahu Akbar. All right, guys. So we're coming to the end of today's live stream. Anything anybody wants to add before we end?
I'm good.
Today's session was incredibly beneficial.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
No, I was just adding that, alhamdulillah, I think today's session was incredibly beneficial, in terms of like, because it's been a while since we've had one like all of us together, but I think this is a great way to, re-energize that fight and, remind ourselves and everyone that's here that it's very important for us to do whatever we can, regardless of how big or small it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we have to understand that this is ibadah. Ibadah is not just zikr, it's not just salah, fasting, staying away from haram. Ibadah is standing up for the rights of Muslims. Ibadah is aiding your brother. We are trying to aid our brothers and sisters in Islam. What else are we trying to do? And Allah loves the deeds which are consistent, even if they're small. So what our intention, inshallah, is to have this on every Saturday. Even if one Saturday, due to busyness, we can only do half an hour, so it's consistent. We obviously allow people to come in and we have discussions, but we were just catching up ourselves. I haven't spoken to Arsalan in, I think, last time I spoke to him was probably before Ramadan. Same with Amazul. Bro, alhamdulillah, may Allah bless you. The Launch Good platform worked out really well. I actually got a call from Brother Umar Kanat on, I think, the day after Eid, and he was just thanking the whole campaign and stuff like this. Because look, at the end of the day, the Uyghur Human Rights Project been around 16 years, fantastic work. Even this money is peanuts compared to what's needed. But already, just literally a few days after Eid, they put out this amazing report on the Imams, right?
Yes.
Just really, really good, well thorough. Peter Irwin, or whatever his name is. Fantastic, well researched, and nobody can deny the evidence. The evidence is just overwhelming. So people like him, who are full-time researchers, academics, who are putting out this stuff which is gold, and governments can act on information like this. Muslims can use this as a basis of arguments to, and he's done the Muslims a huge service by doing this. He's done the Uyghur cause a huge service. So organizations like this, they have to be supported.
Alhamdulillah. And I don't know if Omar told you, but when he called me, he was saying like a lot of that money that alhamdulillah we've been able to raise is going to go to the Uyghur people living in Turkey and Thailand, and they're like detained by the forces, are kind of stuck in limbo. So it's going to be going to help them out, inshallah.
Arsalan, you want to add anything before we end?
Yeah, I just noticed like every time whenever I put out a video or whenever we do or every time I do a talk, I always see people like ask those number, like what's going on and all that. So it's just like we still have people still like only learning about it in the middle of the movie, so to speak. So I would encourage everyone who, I always get, people saying like, oh, can you give me more information? Just go to the channels, go to previous talks, type in my name, Uyghur, type in Subur's name and write Uyghur next to it. And you'll see all the different issues and history and everything that we talked about. And that just makes it easier because we don't necessarily, unfortunately, if we could, we don't have the time to go to each, DM them and, with the sources. So just go through the channels and just go, just a few months back, and you'll see all that information that you need.
Yeah, and Radio Free Asia, they're always putting out stuff.
Yeah.
And the Uyghur Human Rights Project, but they're putting out new information, but the background is the same. Mass surveillance, mass detention, organ harvesting, sterilization, rapes, killings, kidnappings, disappearances. I mean, that's like the bread and butter for the Chinese Communist Party. And then it does additional things, like recently, is very sad to hear Brother Ayub Wali, who Arsalan, you interviewed, and the interviews on this channel as well, alhamdulillah. The sad thing is that he put up on Twitter that his niece died in detention, right? So that's just pure evil. And these are people that we're talking and interacting with. This isn't like some hearsay. This is like people we're talking to. Their own family members are being tortured and dying and going through these types of things. So may Allah bless you guys for joining the live stream. I really do believe we are at a point in terms of the Western media, at least, inshallah, it's going to come to the Eastern media, it's going to come to the Muslim media, but at least the Western media, that this is now mainstream. And if we keep this pressure up economically, everybody, look, ultimately, what did the Prophet ﷺ teach us? 3 people are going to go to Jannah for 1 arrow. Yeah, you guys know this narration? 3 people will go to Jannah. 3 people will go to Jannah for 1 arrow. Yeah. So the person who makes the arrow, the person who hands it to the archer, and the archer who fires the arrow. Yeah. The fact is, we are the ones who are part of that process. Everybody watching and everybody doing this. What do I mean? Every single time there is an increase of pressure on China, it gets less economic money. This is a fact. This is not dubious. The activism for the last couple of years has tarnished the Chinese state's pristine image of the happiest Muslims on earth. Every time there's a trade deal that's cancelled, or something very simple, somebody refuses to buy a Chinese product, every single time that's an arrow that's sent against the Chinese Communist Party. They're getting less money for their military, for their surveillance, for their intelligence, for their oppression. So every single time we do something like this live stream, or even a Twitter thing, everything is part of one whole. And if our intention is pure and for the sake of Allah, we are of those people who are part of the arrow making process. Now, somebody may say, no one's firing a physical gun, no one's firing a physical arrow, no one's doing this. Yes, but there's physical monetary impact of all the work, which is just as good as firing arrows at the enemy. It's just as good, because I saw this thing recently. If you are fighting an enemy that's larger than you, you go for the heart. You go for stabbing the heart. And I'm sorry, if you two are both large armies, but if you're a little weeny army, the best thing you can do against a large army is to go around and cut off their supply routes, cut off their bread and butter, cut off their electricity. That's all you can do. You can just hit and run, just go and do and that's what boycotting is doing. We're simply trying to contain this monster by continuously doing these things. And look, it's very, very important. One of the beautiful things about the narration of the Prophet ﷺ, the actions are brought by intention, is that actions are facilitated by good intentions as well. That's one of the scholarly understandings, that when you have a pure intention, Allah makes the thing easier. This is an interpretation that some scholars have made. So everybody watching, renew your intention. We're in the aid of our brothers and sisters. We're in the path of Allah, and we are firing these arrows, and these arrows are having an impact. And all of this is simply through activism. You're not breaking any law, you're not calling for violence, but all of it, inshallah, if you're sincere, is going to be big rewards for you on the day of judgment. And Allah will protect us and our own future progeny from these types of fitan. So may Allah bless you guys. And we will be live again next week at 6 o'clock.
Inshallah.
alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.